Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest on the line right now,
Yes,
Reverend
indeed.
Al. Hey, Reverend Al.
Good morning, Rev.
Good morning.
You got your morning workout in already?
Oh yeah, I did that at 5:30 in the morning while you rolling over.
No, we're up at 5:30 in the morning, working already.
How you holding up, Reverend?
I'm holding up, man. It's rough for everybody, but we have to hold up. We have no choice.
Are you able to keep a steady daily routine, Rev?
Oh yeah, I work
pretty normal
out in the
routine?
morning. I do. I work out in the morning in the apartment. Then I go to National Action Network because we partnering with the World Central Kitchen folk. We feed about 2,500 people a day with prepackaged meals. I do my radio show from the network. So I maintain somewhat a routine, but not nearly as much moving around as I normally would do.
Gotcha.
Now, Reverend, now this morning we were talking about Easter Sunday and what can people do from home? How can they celebrate from home? So what are some suggestions that you have? Because it is Easter. People aren't able to physically go to church.
They should not. I've been really on my fellow clergymen to not have in-person services. We don't even have in-person rallies on Saturday. We just do it on live stream and on Impact Television. People should stay home. They should use this time to really bond with their families and really do some things like reading and studying. And something that I think that we don't do enough of is really talk to the people in our family that may be right there with us, 3 or 4 people that we never really talk to. Why is our crazy uncle crazy? Why is our daughter or son the way they are? I mean, we know more about our hangout buddies than we know about the people that live in our house. A good Easter thing would be to really get into why people that are in the same habitat you are the way they are, and come out of this as a stronger unit than we went in this. Rather than make the pandemic work us, let's work the pandemic.
Now, when you say crazy uncle, you mean an uncle that may be dealing with mental health issues, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I say that with love because all of us have mental health issues. Some just
absolutely
better than others. Some of them admit it. But there is a reason for all behavior, and we need to, rather than respond to the behavior, go down and to find out the reason for the behavior, because you may be able to help them or heal them, or it may heal you in your pursuit of what's going on. What I found out, Charlamagne and God, is that the more I delved into other people's problems, I found my own problems. It helped me more than it helped them sometimes.
That's right. Now,
absolutely.
Rev,
you're always on the front lines, Rev. And we always ask, this is affecting our community so crazy. I mean, people are dying at high rates, especially our community. What is the Rev doing, and how can people help to make sure that our communities, these death rates slow down a little bit?
We have got to deal with the fact that, first of all, this started with this bogus thing that black folks don't get a coronavirus, which is bogus. Not only do we get it, we are 2 to 3 to 1% more of those that are dying. When you look at the fact that the homeless and those inmates in prison were not even being tested. We raised earlier in National Action Network that you've got to test the homeless and you have to test the incarcerated. I even called the White House, and to my surprise, President Trump called me back, and I said to them on the phone, I said, look, you and I don't think a lot of each other, but y'all are ignoring the fact that if you don't have the moral commitment to test the homeless and to test the inmates, think of the fact that the homeless I passed your building on Fifth Avenue. They're right down the block. Some rich guy can walk by and get infected because you're not testing them. So do it out of your own agenda, but do it. And the thing that we need to do is support putting pressure on this administration. SBA, $30 billion for small businesses, but our businesses in large chunks are not banking in those banks. Those banks are saying they're only dealing with their customers. So we're putting pressure on the Secretary of Treasury, Mnuchin, to deal with alternative financial institutions, community banks. In our community, you go to Chicago, you have more check cashing places in our community than you do banks. So what people should do is they can go to nationalactionnetwork.net. support us as we put pressure on this administration, as we work with the Congressional Black Caucus to deal with small businesses in our community getting what it should, and putting pressure on state and local governments to test everyone, including the incarcerated and the homeless.
Let me ask you a question, Reverend Al, because I saw Donald Trump a couple of days ago when he was at his daily coronavirus conference, and he was addressing the issues that are happening in the Black community as far as coronavirus, but he said he doesn't know why it's impacting so hard. And I was like, does he really not know? Because it's bigger than just Black people thinking that they couldn't get it. You got to address the existing medical issues in the Black community, less access to healthcare, and just the fact that the biggest disease that's never been cured in America is systemic racism.
Absolutely. The problem is that the coronavirus pandemic did not start the inequality. It only put a Clegg light on it that was already there. We have always been the ones that were given the worst healthcare services in the country. We have the least amount of healthcare venues or places in our community. And we have we're number one in most of the healthcare infirmities that make us vulnerable to this whole pandemic. We are number one in heart ailments. We're number one in hypertension. We're number one in stress. We're number one in obesity. So all of these are the things that make you the most vulnerable. This didn't just happen when the pandemic arrived. This was there, and it was because of structural health neglect from government and the services that they give. We pay the same taxes. There's no such thing as whites or rich pay this tax and blacks, y'all have a lower tax because y'all don't get the same services. We pay the same percentage of taxes, but we don't get the same public health services. We don't get the same services. And the results are that we are less healthy because of structural inequality and racism. And I don't know what he didn't get. You know, it reminds me of people that always say to me, well, Reverend, I don't see race. You see race. You wasn't born black. I had no choice but to see race because
Right.
I was
That's a
born
fact.
in a racial situation.
A second ago, Reverend Al said he reached out to the White House. He called the White House, and Trump called him back. Does Trump realize how he's affecting our community, all the moves that he made? Is he going to start to have a black agenda and look out for our communities since he did reach back out?
No, I don't think that that first of all, the conversation was a 3 or 4 minute conversation. It didn't get that far. I was stunned that he even returned the call. But the fact is that if you look at his record, I don't think that he has an agenda for our community. I don't even think he has an agenda for the country. I think he deals with as he goes. I've laid out my appeal that they should deal with testing those that are homeless and those that are incarcerated, because I think that we have an obligation to speak for those that can't speak for themselves. And that was the long and short of the call. Now, I think that he and anybody else are going to do what we make them do. And how do we make them do that? We have to put pressure on these local officials who are up for election this year and make them say, look, we don't want to hear no excuse about what he doesn't do. Movements come from the bottom up, not from the top down. They will do what we force them to do. But if we sit home watching reality TV and looking out the window thinking this is going to go away one day by itself and that everything will be all right, we're crazy. We have to sit in our houses, email, phone, whatever we've got to do, and put pressure on these officials that we cannot have an unequal, unfair health response to this pandemic.
What are some of the main things you think need to happen right now? Like we see Governor Cuomo in New York has opened up some testing facilities, and they have some drive-through ones because they want to make sure that those testing facilities are in African-American neighborhoods. What are some more things that you feel like need to happen in order to get this pandemic under control?
There needs to be even more testing directing in our community because you have some in our community who don't have a car to drive in. So we need to have locales that are in our community that we can walk up to, that we can deal with in a very even way without the shame of whatever the results are, but the pride of knowing that we're doing this to make things happen in our community. And we also need to be very, very, very vigilant that our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, who some of them are suffering and dying, have the protection that they need and the equipment that they need to protect themselves so they can even delve in more in our community to do this testing.
You're absolutely right, Reverend. And I want to ask you something because, I get calls from senators and mayors and governors and stuff like that, but I've never gotten a call from a president. What happens when a president calls you? What does it come up as, a block number?
Well, it came with a 202 number, and then when I picked up, it was on my cell phone. And when I picked up, the secretary said, Reverend Al Sharpton, the president's on the line. And I was surprised because it was Trump. Now, I've gotten calls from when President Obama was in because we would talk from time to time. But it's just like a 202 number. I remember when President Obama was in, it was usually a block number. But this time, it was a 202 number that I didn't recognize.
So they too stupid to block the number. Could you pass the number on? Would you mind passing the number on to the people? I got some things I want to get off my chest, Rev.
I didn't write the number down, but what I did was when I called the White House, that's why I said I was surprised he returned the call. I got the switchboard. I told who I was, and they plugged me into the president's office, and I talked to the secretary.
So wait a minute, Rev.
My thing was, Charlamagne, I was going to leave the message, and I was going to get on my TV show or the radio show and say, I even called the White House. I tried to get through. I was surprised 3 hours later he did call me back.
So wait a minute, Rev. You just Google White House number and just called the number?
Oh, no, I've been calling the White House 30 years.
Yeah, he has that number.
Because he said, I just reached the switchboard. You just called it. Let me just call
Hey,
the White
you
House
know what?
today.
202-456-1414. That's the general number. I've been calling that 30 years.
Write that down. I need that.
I'm going to call that right now. See if he call me back.
Hey, I'm going to tell you something. That's how I know Donald Trump quarantining too, because if you text somebody right now or call them, they call you back immediately because they ain't got nothing else to do. Now, Rev, I want to ask you a question about Easter. Why do people think just because you believe in God, you don't have to follow social distancing rules and you can still congregate in the church?
They call that ignorance. There's a difference between rituals and churchianity and Christianity. We like the rituals. We like to go through the perks. I never found out where the Easter bunny came from when we talking about a resurrection. Is all of these trappings that we get caught in. If you really believe in the resurrection was about Jesus coming, proving that we could suffer, we could even die, and still rise again. How do you practice and praise and worship rising again? By putting people at risk to fall and to die.
Oof.
You cannot put people at risk to die celebrating the resurrection. That's an oxymoron.
Woo!
Right.
That's a ball right there, Rev.
Now, Reverend, now we appreciate you calling in, man. Before you leave, Rev, I think it's only right that you end this.
Hold on, I know you want to get to the prayer. Before we get to the prayer, I have to ask the Rev, who's doing your hair at a time like this, Rev?
Oh boy.
Who does it every day? Me and my comb.
You got an old school hot comb, or what, you put it on the stove and heat it up?
It ain't hot. It ain't hot. I do my regular comb, and I know what to do on the weekends. And only Angela knows what I do on weekends to keep my hair right, and that's between.
You put that bonnet on.
Angela,
you put that bonnet on.
Angela, why does the guy with no hair always ask that question when I call him?
Now, Reverend Al, you know why. It sounds like a little jealousy.
She said you put it in a doobie. All right, Reverend Al. Let's do a prayer.
Yeah, let us pray. Dear God, as we face this pandemic on this Easter weekend, let us realize that just as you broke the grip of death, we can break the grip of disease, but not only break it physically in terms of our personal health, but in terms of how we look out for all of your children to make it fair and equal. Let us not in this time think of how down we are, but think of how we can rise from our own internal stress, from our own strife, from our family disorders, from our mental anguish. Let us use this time alone to have a real resurrection, to dig deep and find that core in us that is the resurrection, that is the rising ability to rise above our circumstance and come out of this better, bigger, and stronger. And we'll give you the praise. These blessings we ask in your name and for thy sake. Amen.
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 Thank
you, Rev. You be safe out there, man. Stay healthy.
You be safe. Take care, y'all.
Yes, sir.
All right, Rev. All right, when we come back, we got rumors on the way. E, what we talking about?
Imagine that you can't find your child, but we'll tell you what R&B star could not find her child and had to actually put out a plea on her Instagram stories asking for any type of information.
All right, we'll get to that next. Keep it locked. It's The Breakfast Club. Good morning.